When I was 22, I started seeing a guy I met on a dating app. His name was Ethan, and we went on about 4 dates over a little more than a month. At first, things seemed fine. Our first date was a quick coffee date, lasting less than an hour, more like a screening to ensure he seemed normal. Our second date was at a nearby bar for drinks. We both got a nice buzz, and it was a good time. Our third date was dinner, and that's when I started to question things. Whether I really clicked with his personality, or if something felt slightly off about him. The date ended with a kiss, the first and only time we kissed, so I convinced myself that because I let him kiss me, things were fine. It wasn't until a couple of weeks later, on our fourth and final date, that we went out for drinks again. This time, I approached it with less enthusiasm, paying closer attention to little quirks in his behavior that I realized were somewhat unusual. It's hard to explain exactly what I mean, but some of his mannerisms gave off antisocial and borderline creepy vibes. He also drank far too much on this date and became very touchy-feely at the bar, trying to kiss me multiple times. I'm not a fan of public displays of affection, especially not when sitting at a bar with people next to me. I politely turned down his advances, and within a few minutes, I mentioned I was tired, heavily implying we should leave. He asked for the check, paid it, and we grabbed our coats and left. As we walked to our cars, he stopped me and bluntly asked if we could go home together. I said, "Not tonight. I'm tired and have work tomorrow," which was a lie. Shockingly, he kept pushing, saying he'd drive me to work tomorrow and such. I found it absurd whether he was drunk or not. I also wasn't a fan of him driving home drunk. At that point, I decided I wouldn't see him again. I went to my car in the parking lot across the street and started driving home slowly, as I'd had a couple of drinks in my system. I wasn't drunk, but I was still very cautious. I was also hyper-aware of my surroundings, looking around for cops, which is perhaps why I noticed the same car was still behind me after I made at least 3 turns. At a certain stoplight, I realized it looked like Ethan's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" He replied quickly, saying, "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." I called him, but he wouldn't pick up. This was so weird and frankly creepy. I pulled over and texted him to stop following me, saying I was fine. He stopped in the middle of the street for a second, presumably to read my text, and then drove off. He didn't text back until I got home and was in bed. He wrote, "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time, we should do something a little more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't respond. The next morning, he followed up with, "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still waited a bit to respond. Not even 2 hours later, he sent a question mark, so I decided to reply before it got worse. I wrote, "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." After this, the angry texts started coming in, the worst of which was, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that. How about you pay me back half of everything I bought for you then?" There were a few other angry texts with personal information, so I won't include them, but they were enough to prompt me to block him. I thought this would be the end of it, but then I started receiving no-caller-ID phone calls non-stop. I ignored them all until he finally seemed to get the message and stopped. The next day, when my parents weren't home, I got home from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the stoop with a card. The card was an apology from Ethan, asking for a second chance. He somehow knew where I lived, which disturbed me. In his mind, he must have thought this would seem charming or sweet, but in reality, it was extremely alarming. I sent a long, final text to him saying, "Please do not contact me anymore and never come to my house again, or I'll file for a restraining order." I kept his number blocked so I wouldn't see his response. I thought things were over, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Not long after, I was home alone for the night. My parents' house is large, and I had a loft bedroom, meaning it was the highest point in the house. I awoke in the middle of the night to something. I wasn't sure what at first, but I felt like I was hearing noises from downstairs. I listened closely and then heard what was clearly a door opening from outside my bedroom, one of the upstairs doors. Nobody was supposed to be home that night. Even in my haze from just waking up, I immediately thought, "Intruder." I crawled out of bed onto the floor, slid under the bed, and called 911. I texted everyone in my family asking who was home. I heard distant noises from somewhere in the house, possibly one of the other bedrooms. Then my bedroom door opened, and footsteps came up the carpeted stairs. After they reached the top step, there was silence. The whole room was carpeted, so I couldn't hear any potential footsteps. Then I heard the drawers next to my bed start opening. I held my mouth with my hands to mask my breathing, feeling my heart race. I heard a man's voice mutter, "God damn it," under his breath. In that moment, I thought, wait, that might have sounded like Ethan's voice. I still didn't move and prayed my phone wouldn't get any notifications. I heard more rummaging sounds. He was going through my entire dresser. Then I heard and felt the bed move as he sat down. I was staring at the outline of 2 shoes through the bed skirt, visible even in the dark. I don't know what he was doing on the bed, but he sat there for over 2 or 3 minutes before getting up. I heard him mutter, "Fucking hell," under his breath. I heard all the drawers close, then footsteps walking back down the stairs, the door shutting, and sounds of footsteps descending to the living room. I called 911 again, whispering into the phone just to be safe. I stayed on the line and remained under the bed for 10 to 15 minutes until a police officer arrived. I went down to meet them at the front door, and even that was tense. After letting him in, I told him everything he didn't already know from the phone call. He did a sweep of the house, and during that another officer arrived, a female one, who also assisted in the search. It turned out every window was unlocked, and one of the windows, the dining room one, was large enough for someone to crawl through, though I don't think anyone pictured someone squeezing through the bush in front of it and climbing in. I gave a verbal statement of everything. I was given a report number, and they left. When my parents returned home the next day, they already knew everything from my text and phone call. We went to the police station with my report number and provided as much information as possible, such as text screenshots, including him admitting he followed me home. They said they'd investigate, though without solid proof it was him inside the house. It was tricky. I think the case lost steam when I didn't have concrete evidence. However, I successfully obtained a restraining order against him, and I was advised never to accuse him of breaking in or contact him again. He thankfully didn't contact me, but from that point until I moved out of my parents' house, I was always uncomfortable, fearing he might be creeping around outside. Even today, I sometimes worry he might find out where I currently live. I was in the 6th grade when this happened. It all started the week of Halloween, when I stayed after school to help decorate a haunted house for my school's Halloween carnival. I often got to hang around with some of my friends, and we were rewarded with pizza for helping. Along with my friends, there was another kid who stayed late. I'll call him Noah. We got along the entire time we stayed after school, and he never gave me any reason to feel uneasy around him. He was genuinely a funny and cool kid. Fast forward 2 weeks. I was suddenly approached by a group of girls in my grade, all excited with wide grins on their faces. I asked them what was going on, and they told me I had a secret admirer who would be texting me that night. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited or at least curious about it. I wanted to know who. Later that night, as I was about to go to sleep, I got a notification from Messenger, the only app I used at the time to communicate with my parents when I was home alone. The message was from Noah. I had completely forgotten that I added him on Facebook on Halloween. I opened the message, and it read, "Sophia, I need to talk to you." I was concerned and quickly replied, "Yeah, what's going on? Everything okay?" To this day, I wish I hadn't replied. The typing bubbles appeared and stayed there for a good 2 minutes, meaning he was still typing. It felt like forever until his message finally came through. I didn't expect what came next. In a long paragraph, he confessed his love for me, saying how I'd been driving him crazy since Halloween. He explained how he tried to impress me during recess with his soccer skills, but I never seemed to notice him. He said he was growing tired of being ignored and ended with, "I want you to notice me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, will you be my girlfriend?" I cringed at every word. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking, what the hell? I barely even know this kid, and I drifted apart from him a long time ago. I tried to come up with a way to let him down gently, as I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I told him I didn't like him like that and just wanted to be friends. I could tell right away he didn't like this answer. He kept asking why, and I had to come up with a reason each time until he eventually stopped answering. The next morning was a nightmare. Some of his friends kept coming up to me, saying Noah wanted to kiss me, which he told the entire grade he wanted to do, and that he'd do it even if it meant cornering me. Taking this as a threat, I told my teacher. She told me to stay inside during recess and lunch, and to run back to the classroom if he ever got close to me. This wasn't enough for me, so I reported him to the principal, who said he'd do something right away, which gave me some relief. I should mention that I lived right across the street from my school, and everyone knew this, including No. Later that week, I was walking home from school. I hadn't been inside my house for more than 2 minutes when I heard someone knocking on my front door. I peeked out the window just in time to see someone ducking behind a parked car across the street. It had to be No. He must have been following me. My mom opened the door and found a piece of paper on the floor addressed to me. I read the note aloud, and it said there was a surprise waiting for me under the Cadillac in my driveway, which belonged to my brother at the time. My mom checked, but there was nothing. After that day, my brother's Cadillac stopped working. I still have no idea what Noah did to the car, but my brother had to sell it. My nightmare didn't end there. I was constantly harassed by Noah's friends, telling me to give him a chance and that he'd treat me right. There was even a moment when I caught Noah taking a picture of me walking home. I only saw him because I barely heard the sound of an iPhone camera behind me. Who knows how many photos of me he had on his phone. Every morning, I woke up to a message from him saying things like, "I can't wait to see you at school," or, "I bet you'll look beautiful today." The harassment and stalking were only getting worse, making me fear for my safety, especially since he knew where I lived. Finally, I was called into the counselor's office, and I felt relieved, expecting her to say Noah would get in trouble, or that the cops would be involved. Anything. Instead, what I heard was worse. The counselor told me that boys will be boys, that they do crazy things when they're in love, and that I shouldn't be mad about it. She said I should feel flattered, as this kind of stuff was bound to happen, and the only thing I could do was accept it and learn from it. At the time, I didn't see the problem with her words and genuinely believed her, but looking back, it was an insane and disturbing thing to say to a sixth grader who was being sexually harassed and fearing for her safety almost every day. That afternoon, I came home and told my mom everything the counselor said. She was rightfully furious. I was called to the principal's office again that same week, this time with my mom present. I clearly remember my mom telling the counselor and principal, "What are you waiting for? For something bad to happen to her before you do something." She asked why it was taking so long for action to be taken. They both stayed silent. My mom ended it by threatening the counselor and telling her never to speak to me again unless she was present. Unfortunately, I don't think the school ever punished No, which enrages me to this day. He basically got away with everything. It doesn't even end there. One night during the weekend, when my parents were out shopping, I was about to go to bed after watching a YouTube video on my iPad when I heard something at my window. I'm on the second floor, so this was especially strange, as the only things that hit my window are birds accidentally flying into it. I sat up, listening, and then it happened again. It sounded like someone had thrown something at the glass, then again and again. Consistent thuds that started to freak me out. I finally got the courage to get up and see what it was. My heart dropped when I opened the curtain and looked down to see Noah holding a handful of rocks. Looking up at my window, he had somehow figured out which window was mine. He was about to throw another when he noticed me. I could faintly see him saying something, but I didn't stop to find out what. I checked that every window and door was locked, and thankfully, everything was. When I returned to my room, I received 4 messages from Noah. "Why did you leave? I just want to talk. I'm sorry, all I wanted was a kiss. Please forgive me, you're not who I thought you were. Bye." I blocked him after that. Thankfully, I never had another incident, though I had to see him throughout my school years, from 6th grade to senior year. The last I heard about him was that he was arrested. God only knows for what. The saddest and scariest part of my story is that a counselor was comfortable telling me this kind of behavior was a compliment and a learning experience for me as a girl. I just hope that woman no longer works with children, and that I never have to see No again. I want to remain as anonymous as possible with this. This was a very serious occurrence that I have pieced about, and unfortunately, it scarred me. I'm changing all towns and names in the story, so there's no way it gets traced back to me. I've been a very reclusive person most of my life, starting at a young age. Even in my early school years, my teachers told my parents I had antisocial behavioral problems. I was even included in some 20-minute classes for speech and behavior in elementary school. At the time, I didn't understand why I was there while the rest of my class wasn't. Middle school was when the pressures of the social hell that school has really started to set in. Kids began forming their friend groups, and that only carried over into high school and got worse. I never had learning disabilities or anything, just social issues, which have improved as I've grown older. But I'd still consider myself an awkward, introverted person. However, I've made close friends, and I'm grateful for that. Now let's talk about girls. Being a social recluse comes with having trouble with the ladies. Honestly, not to get too graphic, but it's relevant to my story, I lost my virginity at 21, which is a bit late, I'd say. This happened when I was 23. I had moved out of my parents' place already, having worked a high-paying job in my field for a couple of years. I bought a townhouse in my hometown. It was affordable but a nice, large townhouse. I don't live there anymore, but it was 2 floors, the kind of place that would impress girls at 23 if you owned it. One day, swiping on Tinder, I matched with a pretty decent-looking girl. I'll call her Olivia. We went on a date at a nearby restaurant for dinner. I was a little in my head, thinking she was judging me or that I was acting awkward. By the end, I felt like she'd never want to see me again. But when I was in bed after getting home, she texted me, saying she really liked me and had fun. I was ecstatic, honestly. We went on a second, third, and fourth date, and things felt great after I got out of my head. We became boyfriend and girlfriend fairly quickly. But the honeymoon phase didn't last forever. When you first start seeing someone, you get excited anytime they text or call. You crave the attention because, ideally, it's mutual. But slowly I started feeling like she was texting me a bit too much, at all hours of the day. She'd ask where I was, and if I was doing something or took my time responding, she'd call me or send question marks to follow up. One day, while we were on the couch, she demanded we share our locations with each other. I wasn't thrilled about this, even though I had nothing to hide, but I did it anyway. We were a couple of months into the relationship, with our locations shared, and this is where things went really sour. She'd start asking why I was at James's house and not answering her texts. It got so bad that one night, when I was with James and my friend Liam in James's basement on a Friday night, she showed up at his house. James's mom walked Olivia downstairs. She didn't even hide that she was pissed at me and immediately spoke in a loud voice, almost a yell, reprimanding me for goofing around at James's house instead of answering her texts about going to some winery the next day. I asked if we could discuss this later, but she insisted I leave with her. I apologized to my friends and went outside with her. We had an argument in the street. She wanted to come home with me, but I told her no. We had driven separately, so I drove home and told her not to follow me. When I got home, I sent her a long text saying we needed a break and that I needed space. Should I have done this in person? Yeah, probably. Text message breakups aren't fair most of the time, but honestly, in the moment, I was scared of what her reaction would be in person. Of course, she started calling me over and over, blowing up my phone with texts. When I eventually stopped answering, I heard aggressive pounds at my front door and constant rings from the doorbell. It got so bad that my neighbor came out and asked her what she was doing. I heard Olivia screaming at him that I'm a piece of shit and this and that, and my neighbor calmly told her to go home. I listened to everything with my ear to the door. She did leave, and honestly, I was kind of disturbed. I'm not saying the crazy came out of nowhere. There were definitely signs, but I was blind to some of it because of the honeymoon phase. The next day, I remembered to stop sharing my location with her, and immediately, as if she were obsessively checking, she angrily texted me for doing that. I was more and more sure of my decision to cut ties with her with every text she sent. My final text to her was, "I'm sorry, Olivia. I have to block you for a while. You're scaring me." Surprisingly, she didn't come knocking or anything. However, I noticed she instantly stopped sharing her location as well. Exactly 1 week later, I went to James's house again and hung out with the guys. I left around 11 p.m. and got home shortly after. I wasn't tired and was hungry, so I threw some food in the microwave and sat on the couch to watch a movie. I was browsing streaming apps for something good. I wanted a scary movie, when the microwave beeped, and it went silent. I suddenly heard a click or thud from the dining room. The layout of the downstairs of the townhouse looped around in a circle: kitchen to dining room to living room to den, all separated by a wall in the middle. However, the den and dining room had a door, not an opening. To ensure complete silence, I grabbed the TV remote and muted it. Then I surely heard the door separating the den and dining room clicking open. I peered into the dining room and blurted out, "Who's in here?" To no response, I entered the dining room, my blood running cold as I saw the door was open. I have a thing about keeping doors in my home shut, and that door was no exception. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife from the knife block, and called 911 right away. I had never called 911 before. This was a first. On the phone, I spoke loudly so whoever was there would hear that I was on the phone with the police. Whether this was a good idea is debatable. I said, "I think my crazy ex-girlfriend has broken into my house. Please send someone." The rest of the call was me explaining what was going on, why I thought it was my ex, and the operator instructing me to wait outside if possible. So I went outside and waited near the front door. Surprisingly quickly, a police car rolled up. I briefly explained what I thought was happening and led the officer into my home. We performed a thorough search of the place together, and no one was there. We checked the mini crawl space in the closet, every closet, under the beds, under the couches, even the mini attic. When the coast was clear, he told me to call again if I heard anything, which suggested he believed me and knew I wasn't making it up or going crazy. My night was obviously disturbed after that. No way I could sit in the living room and watch a movie now. I ate my food, which had been sitting in the microwave, and went to my room, locking the door. I texted all my friends and family about how spooked I was, but since no one was there, I had to dismiss it as one of those creepy moments of something in the house moving by itself. I almost texted Olivia but refrained. I took a melatonin, and from what I remember, I quickly drifted off to sleep. However, I'm a light sleeper, and something woke me up. I didn't know what, but something in the room felt off. I checked my phone and saw a bunch of texts from a random number, which must have woken me. I quickly realized it was Olivia. In short, without reading the paragraph she sent, she was apologizing and begging to talk in person the next day. The rest of the texts were her saying, "Are you awake?" and "Wake up," over and over. She said, "Wake up," 8 times total. Surprisingly, she hadn't tried calling me. I responded, "Why are you awake right now? This is crazy that you're blowing me up at an hour like this." Honestly, if I wasn't sure before, these past few days alone have confirmed that I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Please just leave me alone. Seconds after I pressed send, I heard a scream from inside the closet next to my bed. It was Olivia's voice yelling, "No," and then the closet door burst open. I didn't have time to think of anything besides jumping out of bed, opening the bedroom door, and getting out of the room. It wasn't locked anymore, mind you. Once out, I pushed the door shut and held it as she tried to open it. She didn't just try opening it. She started stabbing the door, and I saw the knife she was wielding pierce through my side. In the moment, I decided to scream, "Baby, I love you, stop," instead of something like, "You're sick, and you need help." When I said I loved her, she stopped and calmed down. I took this moment to call 911 again silently while still holding the door shut. We spoke through the door while I had 911 on the line. I came up with some nonsense on the spot, saying I was going through a rough time but loved her and planned to get back with her. She said in a frantic voice, "That's all I wanted to hear. Why couldn't you just be honest with me?" She asked me to open the door. I had to stall, so I told her I was scared and wanted her to drop the knife. Eventually, she agreed, and I told her to throw it across the room so I could hear it land. She did, and I heard the clang of the knife ricocheting off the wall and onto the floor. What I did next was yank the door open and tackle Olivia to the floor. She screamed, fought, and went hysterical, but I didn't care. I held her down as I yelled my address and everything into the phone, which was still connected to 911. I held her down until the police arrived. To my surprise, the police kicked the front door down, and it was so loud it could be heard over Olivia struggling upstairs. Police entered the room quickly. A surprising number of them, actually. Olivia was put in cuffs quickly, and she was hysterically crying. I think the only reason I wasn't crying was because I was in such shock. This was the worst, most scaring night of my life. The nightmare didn't end there, though. There was a long and serious legal process to get Olivia convicted. I never wanted my name or any info out there on the internet to end up on one of those crime YouTube channels, so I've been careful about leaking too much information that could get back to me. Olivia is imprisoned for some very serious charges. No part of that makes me happy. This was someone I spent a chunk of my life with, more or less every day. Someone I thought I loved, someone who tried to kill me. She was not right in the head, and it still pains me how oblivious I was, not only because of how infatuated I became at first, but because of my own lack of self-confidence to a degree that I was so focused on impressing her at first that I didn't pay attention to certain alarming behaviors early on. I know this will stick with me forever, And honestly, even if anonymously, it feels good to get the story out there finally.